Good morning, everyone. Shall we begin by singing together?
Good morning and welcome to First Unitarian. Good morning, yes. We are a multi-generational community seeking to grow in spirit and to grow our capacity to build the beloved community both within our walls and rippling out well beyond. We are so glad that you're here, whether you're in our in-person physical sanctuary or whether you're joining us from home or somewhere else via the live stream. Following the service, I invite you to join fellow congregants for a social hour in Fuller Hall, located just below the sanctuary. And if you're a regular congregant who's lucky enough to be sitting next to someone who doesn't know where Fuller is, maybe you can help them find their way. And if you're new, you're also invited to join a brief welcome circle over in the gallery to my left. It's a chance to meet some community leaders, staff, and other new folks, and to ask any questions that you might have. Next Sunday, March 2nd, you can join me and Jen Thomas, our membership engagement coordinator, for our next Join the Journey in Membership class. And it's a great time to find out more because we will be holding our next membership welcoming celebration and ritual in our sanctuary on April 6th. You can register at the link in the latest issue of Front Steps. And I set up a tiny link because up here on Sunday mornings, over and over, we repeat, go to Front Steps, go to Front Steps. And I thought, if I was new, what is that? So it is the weekly news, and does everyone know what a tiny URL is in this sanctuary? Yes, no, I heard a no, so this is a teaching moment. You have tiny, if you go to www.tinyurl.com, that is something that you can take a long link and make it shorter. So www.tinyurl.com/FUP News. FUP News. You can, every time you hear us say, go to Front Steps, that's where it is. So for all the newcomers coming via the live stream, we want to make it easy for you. So here are some things to know about upcoming events that you'll find links there. Our Board of Trustees has sent out a congregational survey, and this is a great way for us to help evaluate the congregation and all of our ministries. It just takes a few minutes to fill out, and you can find the link in Front Steps. www.tinyurl.com/ let's all say it together, FUP News. If you're in your 20s or 30s, join other young adults for an 8-session series articulating your faith, starting this Thursday evening from 7 to 9, facilitated by me and by Danielle Garrett, our assistant minister. And where can you find a link to register? tinyurl.com/FUP News. We're so excited about next Saturday's Sewell Lecture, A Tale of Two States, Abortion and Reproductive Stories, beginning at 3 p.m. Saturday, March 1st, right here in our sanctuary. Get your tickets and tell your friends about it. This is such an important time, and these are such important stories, and what a wonderful way to invite people into our sanctuary for what is one of the most pressing issues of our time: access to reproductive health care. Registration is also open for the online forum, How Do We Protect Immigrants in Our Community, on March 4th at 7 p.m. on Zoom. And we are delighted to welcome member and retired minister, the Reverend Duane Fickeisen, into our pulpit today. Among many other qualities, Reverend Duane is one of our facilitators of the Good Grief, Navigating Personal Loss, a 4-Sunday series with Dr. Bill Yasnoff, which begins on March 9th. Bill, for those in the sanctuary, would you raise your hand? Bill's right there. So you could actually register by just finding Bill in the narthex or downstairs in coffee hour. And you could also register by going to the Front Steps, www.tinyurl.com/FUP News. This is a service to people that don't know about tiny URLs and to new folks. And now, welcome everyone, and let's extend that welcome throughout the sanctuary.
Well, you join me in the affirmation as Reverend Allison lights the chalice flame this morning. We are Unitarian Universalists. We light this chalice in faith, in hope, and in love. We have gathered once again in person and online. Some of us bring joy and celebration. Some bring woe and sorrow. Some are here seeking, some are questioning. In all of our complexity, we have come to spend this hour in the practice of worship, of worth shaping, of shaping what matters most. So come now and let us worship together in this beloved community. Welcome.
Is
Let's join in our responsive reading this morning. It's an excerpt from Essex 2 by Amanda Gorman. Slowly, grief becomes a gift when we greet it, when we listen to our loss. When we indeed let it live, it will not shrink in size, but lighten in load. It lets us breathe. The densest despair takes us to no ordinary joy. Sometimes diving into the deep inside us is the only way we rise above it. Let's join our voices now in singing our doxology, Spirit of Life.
It's the time in our service when we meditate on all that we give and receive together in this community. It is the time of the offering, including the wondrous offering of music in this sanctuary every Sunday. And I'll lift up another Sunday morning offering. If you come early next week, 8:45 or 9:30, you can get pancakes from the men's group. Come before the chocolate chips and blueberries maybe disappear. It's a favorite amongst many of the families, and my child in particular. And it is a time when we think about the financial contributions that we can offer both to the church and to the difference we seek to make in the world. And I want to begin with an update about Match 25 campaign, the Double Your Gift campaign. As you may remember, we were $120,000 away from our goal of 1.4 million pledges when a generous member and the board were collectively able to give $60,000 towards a match. Well, we did it. We matched. I want you to know, we thought 1.4 would be a stretch, and it was, but we did it, which is incredible. And the second thing I want to say is, so that's the fantastic news. And then sometimes it's also important that we're transparent about one of the challenges. On the less good front, we have yet to receive the ERTC grant from the government that we expected to receive by now, to fund $100,000 of the full budget, which means that if you gave already, thank you. And people wind up offering pledges throughout the year because new people come and join or come back and join. So if you haven't had a chance yet to give to the campaign for 2025, this is a great time, and I didn't want the excitement that we reached our goal for folks to think, well, gosh, there's nothing needed. So if you're able to give, and some of the new folks that may be joining or people who've been around for a while, it will definitely make a difference. And we could count on the ERTC grant, but if you've been noticing the cuts in the government, including in the IRS, I think we have just been discussing whether we can responsibly assume any checks will come from the government. So let me know if you have an opinion. So you can click on the Donate Match 2025 if you haven't made a pledge yet to the campaign for 2025, and thank you if you're able to do that. And now our February plate offering is going to the UUA Disaster Relief Fund to help pool resources to respond to the needs connected with the wildfires in California. And just over a week ago, I met with one of my colleagues serving one of the 2 congregations in Pasadena. And she shared that that meal and that week was the first time she could even think a few days ahead. Staff members and members of our congregations in Pasadena have lost their homes. Some of their children have lost their schools. It's rough times. And so the money that you've already given and the money that Unitarian Universalists across the country have given has made a difference. And she shared how meaningful it was to be able to respond with a yes to a fraction of the need. So your giving to the plate does make a difference, and I just wanted you to know that. If you'd like to donate via check or cash, our ushers will be coming around in just a minute. If you're at home, you can use the QR code on the screen. Another update, the one sometimes behind us on the screen, QR codes don't work. I see people holding up their cameras. But there are QR codes on slips of paper right in front of you in the seats. And you can also, if you're on Boxcast, use the Donate Now button. Thank you for your generosity. It does make a difference. And now for our offering of music.
I would like to briefly introduce this piece. I think I'd be remiss if I did not mention that the offertory for today was written by choir member Richard Scher, and it's known as The Darkness and the Light. It's a fascinating piece where he explores the duality between darkness and discourse and hopefulness and light, and you'll hear that in this piece, and I hope you take a few moments to meditate with that as we explore this together. Thank you.
Rich, Garrett, thank you. Ours is a caring community, and each week we make space for the milestones that have happened in our fellow congregants' lives. Some we share aloud, and others we make space for as you light candles and offer prayers of intentions in the galleries, and or send them to prayer at firstunitarianportland.org. And the ministers and lay ministers hold these prayers throughout the week. The first that I just want all of us to hold, and there are so many cares in these times, can we just take a moment to acknowledge what a difficult time this is for trans and non-binary folks who are being attacked on every front? Can we hold all the people in various branches of our government, from those that reside in DC to those that may be working locally in the park system who are losing positions? See, our babes feel the tone. Can we hold all the folks who are disproportionately impacted, and specifically the ones who are impacted because they've had the courage to speak out and to urge us towards a more inclusive, anti-oppressive democracy? There are people whose names we know and we don't know. And I just wanted to call them into the space in this time when we honor people who have experienced a loss or a transition, as well as a big joy. And I have news to share about a death that just came in. Longtime former member Harriet Levi died on February 19th during an afternoon nap. Among other things, she was an artist and a teacher in a women's studies program. She's survived by her husband Charles and children Iema, Aaron, Adam, and Annika. Let us hold the Levi family. May her memory always be a blessing. And these beautiful flowers are dedicated in honor of Gordon Marshall Ware by his wife Jean Kemp Ware, his beloved of so many years. And we are going to be celebrating his life today at 2 o'clock in Elliott Chapel. Gordon was an architect and an artist, a scientist and a poet, and, I'll give you one detail, and someone who turned a closet into more restroom for folks in Buchanan. So he was definitely someone who gave many offerings. We are going to celebrate his life at 2 o'clock today. Will you pray with me? Spirit of life, known by many names: conscience, God, love, and sometimes no name at all. In a world with so much devastation and heartbreak, we give thanks for this community of companion travelers who help us to navigate towards acts of compassion, integrity, and liberation. In a world where there is so much beauty and joy, we give thanks for this community of companion celebrators who help us to notice and pay attention to what is nourishing and flourishing all around. In recognition that none of us lives forever, we give thanks for the vision of our ancestors, calling each in our own time to respond with a hearty yes to the changes that love requires of us, and by doing so, leading us to choose life and the wholeness of beloved community once more. All these things, and so many others, are our prayers, our longings, and our meditations. May it be so. Amen. Blessed be. Salam, shalom, shanti, peace. And let us be together for a few moments in prayerful silence. And let us sing together. Our reading, Blessing for the Broken-Hearted by Jan Richardson. The Cure for Sorrow, a book of blessings for times of grief. Let us agree for now that we will not say the breaking makes us stronger, or that it is better to have this pain than to have done without this love. Let us promise we will not tell ourselves time will heal the wound, when every day our waking opens it anew. Perhaps for now, it can be enough to simply marvel at the mystery of how a heart so broken can go on beating, as if it were made precisely for this. As if it knows the only cure for love is more of it. As if it sees the heart's sole remedy for breaking is to love still. As if it trusts that its own persistent pulse is the rhythm of a blessing we cannot begin to fathom, but will save us nonetheless.
Joy and woe are woven fine, and when this we rightly know, safely through the world we go. Those words from William Blake are my text today. Let's consider grief. It's such a common emotion. Virtually every one of us experiences it, whether it is in response to the death of a loved one, a significant figure in either our personal or public life, perhaps a favored pet. We grieve the loss of relationships, jobs, homes, our own loss of abilities, and so much more. And yet, we seldom fully acknowledge it or consider how our experience of grieving is shaped by cultural expectations. I will not refer to it as a process. I won't talk about stages of grieving, nor lay out what's normal, because all of those imply that there's a neat and tidy progression from early bereavement to getting over it. That there's some prescribed set of actions that will get us through it and beyond it. It's not. And there isn't. To suggest that grief is a problem to be solved is a disservice to those who grieve. It implies that we are failing if we don't manage to put it aside within a few weeks or a year of our bereavement. Now, I know far more about grief from personal experience than from seminary classes and even pastoring to others. Even from being present at deathbeds, sitting with a teenager as her father's life support systems were turned off, conducting burials and memorial services. But I cared for my spouse as she experienced the development of a rare cancer and treatment for it. I was present as she ended her life using Oregon's Death with Dignity when further treatment was futile. And I have grieved her death for more than 4 years and expect to do so for the rest of my life. My grief is linked ever so closely to the depth of our love and care for one another. Now, if we try to ignore grief, it moves into the shadow parts of our being. It does not rest there, but plots to remind us of its presence, both overtly and covertly. I only learned as an adult that a brother had been born about 10 years before me and had died within 24 hours of his birth. And even later, I learned that a half-sister had been born 13 months before me. Now, I grew up thinking that I was my parents' firstborn. It had always been clear that my mother and father had high expectations for me, but when I learned about my brother, I knew that those expectations were for both of us. My half-sister died in December. She was a lovely woman. Our mother had been raped while my father was away at World War II, and she became pregnant as a result. My parents hid the pregnancy. They temporarily moved away, and my sister was adopted by her delivery nurse. Janice and I only connected after she found me through Mom's obituary. We visited each other's homes, met each other's children and grandchildren, and we exchanged family news, but we might have had a much different relationship had we known each other decades sooner. My parents clearly buried their grief at both the loss of my brother and the rape and the birth of my half-sister. I know that my mother struggled with pregnancy and experienced multiple miscarriages. I believe that the shadow of that suppressed grief appeared both in their expectations of me and in their relationship with each other, which was sometimes fraught. Pushing it into the shadow did not remove or resolve their grief. Because grief is feral and wild, as grief counselor and therapist Frances Willer asserts. It refuses to be tamed. It will not tolerate being hidden. Grief lurks around the corner, ready to pounce. It will strike like a snake suddenly appearing from under a rock, or leap out from the midst of a crowd. It will come calling at an inopportune time and refuse to leave, even if you are not willing to open the door to invite it in. Soon after the death of a beloved dog years ago, Judy and I drove from Pennsylvania to Maine for summer vacation. After the worship service at the church we served, we changed from our work clothes into our good clothes. For me, that was shorts and a t-shirt. Then set out for the 12-hour drive. We were eager to wake up to the sound of surf on the rocks below the cottage we rented. We stopped in New Haven for supper. As we left the highway, we drove through a residential neighborhood, and I saw a woman wearing a white lab coat get out of a car. Her lab coat reminded me of the veterinary staff and our loss. It triggered a sudden burst of tears. Grief pounces on you like that. Weller's description of grief as feral and wild really does fit. Now, our cultural norms rest in what was once a practical cultural need and in our lack of public experience with grieving well. Our culture attempts to put grief into a neat package. Until a little over 100 years ago, grief was viewed quite differently than it is now. Consider those words of William Blake that we sang earlier and that were penned around 200 years ago. Joy and woe are woven fine. Blake was onto a significant understanding of how the world works when he claimed that we could only know joy without experiencing woe, and that when this we rightly know safely through the world we go. In a biography of him by author John Higgs, John writes, "There is no such thing as light without dark or hot without cold. The conflict between these divides is the fuel that moves the universe. A view of the world must include them because a universe without those dynamics simply couldn't exist. To try to solve problems by favoring one side and dismissing the other is to fail to understand how the world works." That describing Blake's philosophy. Roughly a century later, in the early 1900s, Rainer Maria Rilke wrote letters to a young poet. Among his advice is, "So don't be frightened, dear friend, if a sadness confronts you larger than any you have ever known, casting shadows over all you do. You must think that something is happening within you, and remember that life has not forgotten you. It holds you in its hand and it will not let you fail. Why would you want to exclude from your life any uneasiness, any pain, any depression, since you don't know what they're accomplishing within you?" Now, until that time, the early 1900s, the cultural norms for rituals and expressions of bereavement were very different from today's expectations. Prior to World War I and the Spanish flu epidemic, right on its heels, grief rituals included public displays that signaled mourning. In a description of general grief practices, Laura Trottier writes, At the turn of the century, families had a central role in the grief process. There are many depictions of the good death, which was for a person to die at home, to be washed and dressed by relatives, and to be displayed for several days so friends and family could come to visit. But casualties mounted from the First World War, particularly in Britain, and it was deemed important to the war effort to limit expressions of grief. Many deaths occurred on the battlefields, and with a policy of non-repatriation of the bodies, families could no longer be involved in preparing the body for burial. And the government wanted to ensure that the custody of the soldier was transferred from their mothers to the state. Sending a son off to war was deemed a patriotic act, and a stoic acceptance of the death was a sign of commitment to the cause. The war effort could not afford to lose the work of everyone who was grieving. The sheer number of deaths meant that mourning shifted from public to private expressions, and it was expected to be brief. The circumstances compelled an individual duty to carry on. What was necessary for the war effort, however, has impacted cultural expectations for grieving ever since. By the 1960s, Geoffrey Corer wrote that many people believed sensible, rational men and women can keep their mourning under complete control by strength of will and character, so that it need not be given public expression or indulged, if at all, in private. But he continued, but if mourning is denied outlet, the result will be suffering. At the moment, our society is signally failing to give this support and assistance. The cost of this failure is misery, loneliness, despair, and maladaptive behavior, and it's very high. Now, the Spanish flu epidemic came on the heels of the war and further impacted grieving practices. And thus we come to sending thoughts and prayers to survivors and communities that experience mass killings, or in the words of Donald Trump, on the day after a 17-year-old shot and killed a sixth grader and wounded 5 other people in an Ohio school. But we have to get over it. We have to move forward. We have to move forward. We cannot get over it. But we do need to move forward to better understanding grief and to supporting those who are bereaved. I think it's important to remember that while virtually everyone experiences grief, each of us has a unique experience of it. There's no one right way to deal with it. It's feral, it's unmanageable, and it refuses to honor the house rules. For most of us, it gets better. We begin after a time to build a life that contains our grief, but is no longer ruled by it. But if after a year or more of profound grief, you or someone close to you has not begun to include their grief as a part of their new life while moving forward with living, they may be experiencing persistent and profound grief, in which case professional counseling might prove helpful. It's been 4.5 years since my wife Judy's death, and it happens less often, but still occasionally I will pass a neighbor on the sidewalk during my daily walk and they'll ask, "How are you?" I generally say, "Oh, I'm doing well, thanks," and that's partly true. I am doing well, and I am grieving. But I imagine none of them really want to engage in a deeper conversation about my loss and how deeply I miss Judy every day. So I tell only a partial truth. What I would rather hear is, "Hey, It's good to see you. I miss Judy when I go by your house. I think of her and her garden. There are a few close friends who can ask, "How are you?" in a way that I know they really want to know and are ready to have that deeper conversation. But it's not typically on the sidewalk. Often people don't want to name the person who has died in the presence of their widowed spouse, for fear of reminding them of their death. Yet, trust me, please, I am always aware of my loss. Naming her will not remind me of it, but will acknowledge the reality of the loss and of our love. Most of the widows and widowers that I know frequently name their dead spouse in conversation and want to talk about him or her. We tell stories to remember events with them. Our lives together created meaning for us, and remembering them while not bringing them back keeps that meaning alive and fresh. One of the lessons in chaplaincy training and pastoral care is that showing up, just showing up, is far more important than saying the right thing. So I urge you to show up for your grieving friends. Let them know you care. If you need words, try, "I'm so sorry for your loss," or "I really miss him," or "How about a cup of tea?" Don't, however, describe your own grief experience or the death of someone else. It isn't helpful to hear that your aunt died of the same cancer or that your grandfather also had a heart attack. Just show up and be present. Grief is a sign of loss and of love. A deep love results in a great loss, and the profound grief that ensues reflects the importance of the one who has died. Grief stays with us for the rest of our lives. We don't get over it. We do nearly always find ways to carry on. A poem by Rainer Maria Rilke encourages us to fully embrace all that life brings us. God speaks to us, speaks to each of us as he makes us, then walks with us silently out of the night. These are the words we dimly hear. You, sent out beyond your recall, go to the limits of your longing. Embody me, flare up like flame and make big shadows I can move in. Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror, just keep going. No feeling is final. Don't let yourself lose me. Nearby is the country they call life. You will know it by its seriousness. Give me your hand. So, friends, let love and grief both into your awareness. Welcome them, embrace them, and know that you are not walking through this country called life alone. Our cultural approach to grief can shut it down and stuff it into the shadow to pop back up. That, my friends, is tragically harmful. Alternatively, we can support a healthy embrace of loss and help weave joy and woe together. Then we shall safely go through the world. Choose the healthy embrace. Now, Dr. Bell Yasnoff and I will offer a 4-session class for those who are grieving the loss of a close family member. We'll meet on Sundays after worship starting March 9th. The group is limited and pre-registration is required. You can find more information on the front steps, email message, or that link that was mentioned earlier, I suppose. Or you can see Bill. Bill, would you stand up? Bill's right here in front. He's going to hang out here in the front of the sanctuary with a clipboard and be happy to take your registration this morning. And I thank you for the research on the effects of World War I on the way we process grieving. Will you pray with me now? Spirit of life and love, giver of life and also of death, hear our prayer. May we know your presence as we grieve losses in our lives. May you help us to grieve well as we embrace our grief as a sign of the ways we have been impacted by those who are no longer living. Help us to build lives that are bigger than our grief, yet hold it. We will not get over it, but we can learn to thrive. Guide us to be caring companions to those who grieve and to know that we are enough, that showing up is often blessing enough. Amen, and may it be so. Will you rise in body or spirit and join in singing, Let Hope and Sorrow Now Unite? Friends, may all who grieve take heart in knowing that it arises out of the importance of the relationships we had with the deceased, a relationship or relationships that have been transformed by death, yet carries on. This is the day we have been given. Let us rejoice in it and be glad. Go in peace. Practice love. Amen.